Welcome everyone to our October 2023 session of the Housing Opportunity Fund Board. We have a lot of things to cover today. We have very few agenda items, but large and important conversations to have. So our colleagues at the URA are going to provide us with our public comments. We are also going to start with our roll call. Lena Andrews was not able to attend today. Dr. Bay. Tammy Thompson.
Present.
Karen Garrett.
Here.
Councilwoman Gross. Mark Masterson.
Here.
Deidre Washington. Marcus Reed. Dr. Spradley. Alan Cisco.
I'm here. Hi.
Hi, Alan.
I'm here too. I'm sorry. This is Dr. Spradley. I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, wonderful.
Sorry,
Thank you. Derek Tillman.
I'm here.
Adrian Wanaha is present. Kelly Ware.
Present.
Wonderful. We have the presence of a quorum, and we're now going to move to our review and acceptance of our minutes. And those were circulated prior to the meeting. Do we have any comments, corrections, or abstentions? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Kelly. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi. Hi.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Great, thank you, everyone. I believe we have some guests joining us for public comment. We would like to start with Yvonne Smith Tapia from JFCS, and I hope that I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
And I just want to add really quick as well. You'll have 3 minutes for public comment. At about 30 seconds, I'll let you know that you have 30 seconds left.
Sure. Thank you, Jen.
All right, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yvonne Smith Tapia. I'm the Director of Refugee and Immigrant Services at JFCS, and I want to share the challenges that immigrants face accessing housing. Since 2021, Allegheny County has seen an unprecedented influx of refugees with over 1,000 arrivals in a single year, a historic milestone for our city. This number doesn't include immigrants such as Ukrainians who moved to Pittsburgh without the assistance of resettlement agencies such as JFCS. We're proud that Pittsburgh is a certified welcoming place, becoming the 12th city in the United States to achieve this status. Local governments, businesses, and community members recognize the significant economic and social benefits that refugees and immigrants bring to our region. According to the American Immigration Council, in 2019 alone, refugees in the United States accounted for about $25 billion in tax revenue while actively participating in the workforce, providing valuable support to the native-born population, particularly as the city experiences a population decline. Despite their valuable contributions, immigrants encounter numerous barriers when securing housing and applying for affordable options. For instance, the refugees that just arrived to the city often encounter documentation and income requirements set by property management companies that are unrealistic to the circumstances, like the 3 times rent rule, making it very challenging to find suitable housing for them. Many immigrants qualify for affordable housing. However, the Housing Authority of Pittsburgh doesn't provide interpretations to help individuals navigate the application. They also don't have trained staff who understand how to help immigrants apply for affordable housing. When immigrants manage to live in affordable housing, they don't receive vital information in their own language, which puts them in a vulnerable position. Due to the lack of language access and inclusive processes, many immigrants decide to leave the city. Immigrants, as well as other vulnerable populations, must be included in the local government's strategies to address service gaps and unmet needs. Across the United States, cities have established emergency assistance funds to aid refugees and immigrants in paying rent, utilities, and prevent eviction. These funds have proven essential during the COVID years and will continue to assist families in need greatly. For
You have about
instance,
30 seconds left.
yes, for instance, the Michigan State Housing Authority allocated $4 million to the Office of Global Michigan to implement newcomer rental subsidy, providing immigrants with support for their rent. Pittsburgh has an excellent opportunity to follow those footsteps to the cities that implement an innovative solution to support immigrants and refugees. These funds help landlords and property managers understand that welcoming refugees and immigrants in our community, it's a strategic investing of the city, and that we all are committed to being a welcoming destination for refugees and immigrants. Thank you for your consideration for establishing a risk mitigation fund that will enable us to form new partnerships with landlords and property managers to secure housing for refugees. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that comment and for joining us last month and presenting some really compelling data. Suggestion that I'm going to make, I know Derek is on the meeting with us, so I think that the things that you're raising are, points that we really want to overlay in our discussion, our funding decisions, our best practice. And we do have a diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee to the HOF. And so I think, really talking a little bit more with you about, best practice standards and developing resources could be really powerful. And I think, Derek, would you agree that that subcommittee would be a great place to dive a little bit deeper?
Yes, I would. And that's part of the conversation that we're having now. So yes, I agree.
So be on the lookout. I know that we have your contact information. So as that conversation evolves and we schedule meetings, we'll make sure that we, circle back and we start to have this deeper discussion. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Swain, we also heard from Swain and colleagues last month. Swain's here from the Community Justice Project. To reiterate, you have 3 minutes and you will get a 30-second update. Thanks so much for joining us, Swain.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. First off, thank you again for allowing us to present last month. We hope it was useful. While we know it was a lot of information, we want to re-extend our offer to everyone, each and every one of you, staff and board members who have any questions or would like to dive deeper into any of the issues we discussed. I wanted to provide a little bit of context about the legal assistance program's funding since its creation. So the program was created in May 2021, just over 2 years ago. And there have been allocations totaling 1.5 million, if I'm not mistaken, which is about, just under $1 million a year when averaged over the full period of time. The program, took time to get up and running, as all new programs do. And it wasn't until exactly 1 year ago in October that we launched the Lawyer of the Day program that has been, extremely successful. So just wanted to provide that context that the annual allocation amounts may seem lower in the past couple of years. And that's, but it actually differs in terms of the actual amount of funding that the program used over the past two-ish years. I also wanted to reiterate, in situations where the Lawyer of the Day program connects with the residents in the 4 courts that we are currently working in, the case is resolved favorably outright in favor of the tenant, but also where the landlord receives assistance for rental arrears that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to collect on. And that's over half the time that happens. It's normally closer to 12 to 13%. So a pretty significant increase. And then actually another 15 to 25% are resolved even after the judgment has been entered, allowing the person to stay in their home and allowing the landlord to actually receive the rental assistance. Sometimes some of the rental assistance funded by the HOF as well, and stabilize that housing for that family. However, there are lots of courts in the city right now that we are not able to make it to because of funding constraints. So citywide, over the past month, in September, there were 405 cases filed. And the county, just for context, there were over 1,000. So the city is around 1/3 of overall filings. And in the current courts that we're in, there were 156 filings. If we want to get to other courts where there are additional, the need is, clearly there. The West End, for example, there were 27 cases filed.
You have
Oakland
about
South
30
Side.
seconds left.
Thank you. Oakland South Side, another 31, and then Carrick, Overbrook, Allentown, Knoxville is all one big court, and there were 62 cases filed there. All of those courts need Lawyer of the Day program and need that type of support there on the spot so that we can help people in those communities that currently have some support through the legal assistance program, but not nearly as in-depth or hands-on. So for approximately every $200,000 on average, we can expand Lawyer of the Day to an additional court. And yeah, we just wanted to have that in front of you as you discuss the annual allocation plan for next year. So thank you again for letting us present last time, and happy to answer any questions or talk afterwards with anyone. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Swain. Very important items that we all know that we wish we had expanded dollars so we could do more in each one of these facets of our work. So thank you for coming and sharing today. We do not have any other registered public comments. If someone had wanted to provide a public comment but did not have the opportunity to register, you can certainly provide a written comment back to us, and we will do our best to consider any comments that come in. Just a reminder to everybody, please be sure to register for public comment so that we can have the opportunity to hear your thoughts, the things that you'd like to see in the city. And especially, we've had such great data over the last few months. It really helps us make informed decisions when we hear exactly what's happening in the communities around us. All right, so our next agenda item is an administrative update on the HSP program.
Great. Thank you, Adrian, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Derek Kendall Morris. I'm the manager of consumer lending for the URA. Bringing this administrative update to you all this afternoon regarding the homeowner stabilization program. We are in the process of executing a new co-op agreement with the Department of Human Services, to send additional funding to them to run the HSP program because they have spent through the funding that they had in hand. So, we are executing a co-op agreement right now that would consist of the HOF 2022 and 2023 allocations for HSP. Just for context, the 2022 allocation was $525,000 for the HSP program, and the 2023 allocation was $550,000. So as we work through that new co-op agreement so that we can get that money out on the street, we recognize that the need for this program right now is extremely high. We do know from conversations with DHS that, basically the 2022 funds, have already been spent out in the community, and we'll be reimbursing DHS essentially for those funds. And then, the 2023 funding will be spent through rather quickly based on the need that they're seeing through Action Housing, which is the main provider for HSP at this point. So in addition to the 2022 and 2023 allocations that we will be sending to DHS for HSP, we would like to add $175,000 out of the demonstration program allocation from 2023 to further boost HSP and make sure that we can continue to provide services to residents in the community who need them through the end of this year. So that would be our ask today. We'd like to have the advisory board's approval to move $175,000 from the demonstration line item from 2023 into HSP. So that would be our request, but I know we would need a motion for that. So any discussion or any questions that the board has about that, I'd be happy to answer, but that is our request this afternoon.
Great, so can we open for discussion? thoughts, questions, concerns, support from our members?
Hi, Derek, we might have mentioned this and I just missed it, but what would that leave us with in our demonstration dollars account? Or accumulated?
I did not mention that, but I don't know, Jad, do you have that off the top of your head?
Yeah, I believe we have, I think it's 225,000 in there, but let me double check really quick. Let me scroll through really quickly.
That
'Cause I
sounds about
do-
right. In my head, I thought it was under $250,000. And so I just was curious as to, you know, especially since we're going to be moving, allocating later to see how,
Yeah, we have 270,000 there. in
Okay, so this would leave us with 95 if I mathed correctly.
I believe in your math.
Thank you, Dad.
So I had a question. So if this is approved and the funds are moved, would that happen immediately? When would it be expected that those funds would be, accessible on the back end?
Sure. I mean, we have had conversations with DHS and they are aware that, the 2022 and 2023 funds are on their way. This co-op agreement probably will take a few weeks to execute, and then we would be transferring the funds. But DHS and their partners, Action Housing, they are, serving, individuals and families, through HSP as we speak. And these funds will basically be reimbursing them for what they're doing currently. So, a lot of this money, will go out the door as soon as possible, and we'll be reimbursing our partners for work that they're doing today and in the weeks to come.
Hi, everybody. I have a question. Do we have an understanding of what the specific needs are? What are the highest need that we're seeing as part of this program? Is it foreclosure issues? Is it specific to housing repair? What are the needs that we're seeing most?
So my understanding, from communicating with our partners, right now is that the highest need is eviction prevention. That's what the majority of these funds are going towards. It are households that have received a notice to quit or, are headed towards an eviction filing. As Swain was mentioning through legal assistance program, these are folks that are headed to court or who might have already been in court. And these funds can help them to alleviate that eviction situation so that they can remain in their homes. That's
So
what we're seeing the need for.
So, okay, just so I'm clear, and guys, don't forgive me if I'm a newbie here. So I'm just trying to understand. We are using homeowner stabilization funds for rental assistance.
So that should actually say housing stabilization. That's a typo on the slide.
Okay. All right. Great. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there other comments or questions? Do we have a member that would like to bring forward a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to not only send forward the allocations for 2022 and 2023 to DHS in their current state, but also to increase that amount by $175,000 from the demonstration program fund line item. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any abstentions on this vote? Do we have any nays on this vote? It looks like our motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now we have the meat of today's meeting. This is an exciting conversation. Thank you to everyone who sent your allocation overviews to the URA team. Evan, we're looking forward to the dialogue. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. And I can get it started here, let me just share a spreadsheet here that we can discuss while the meeting's going. Is everyone seeing this Excel document?
Yes.
Okay. So I will, I think, go over, just because I think a fair amount of the people here joined late last year and this is their first time going through the allocation plan process. And this document here is kind of just the framework that we can all fill out to figure out what our draft allocation plan is going to be. As a refresher here, there's kind of 3 different brackets. There's the 30% AMI and below income band, and the HOF's enabling legislation requires that 50% of the annual funding for this for the Housing Opportunity Fund goes to 30% AMI or below, and then 50% AMI and below is 25%, meaning $2.5 million of the $10 million allocation, and then another 25% for 80% AMI or below. So there is some balancing that we have to do to make sure that we're hitting these different thresholds here, making sure that we're spending the proper amount of money on the proper income bands. Then within each income band, we have the advisory board's average from the exercise you all did over the past month, filling out your own allocation plans. We also listed what the URA's staff recommendation was, and that all went out to you in the memo that Jad circulated after last month's meeting. And then really what we're focused on here today is this 2024 draft number that we see in the 30% category, 50% and 80%, and then it all sums up over here to be a total amount for each program. Right now, what the URA did, we took the advisory board averages and kind of penciled in some numbers to make sure it all balanced in the actual draft column here. So I will go through what some of the maybe more notable parts of this are. There's many things I'm sure we could talk about, and I'll open the floor to the advisory board to have your own discussion and ask staff any questions. But I do want to call out that the rental gap program, which assists with the actual development of multifamily housing, is reduced by around $1 million this year to $2.75 million. And this is largely just because of the strain that we're seeing and the demand for our consumer facing programs, and with the ARPA funding that's here at the URA and some of our federal sources as well that we receive from the city. We believe that this program could be reduced in 2024, and we wouldn't see necessarily an interruption of services for the program or a need to shut down the program. We also are just breaking into spending the 2023 allocation for our rental gap program. So that is also a reason why we felt that it was appropriate to lower it. Similarly, the for sale development program is at $650,000. Last year, it was funded at apologies here, $900,000. So it's a $250,000 reduction. Again, mostly due to other sources that the URA has right now through the American Rescue Plan Act that are going to support community land trusts, and then also other sources we have to support nonprofit for sale developers. The resulting increases, though, that come from some of the shifting around here, first would be the homeowner assistance program, which does improvements for existing low-income homeowners. That increases by about $1 million to just over $3 million overall for the program. We can look at this twofold, and we can start to talk about that today and then over the upcoming months. But having just wrapped up the application process for HAP, there's a huge need for this program, but then we're also seeing that applicants might need, right now the per project maximum is $35,000 that we provide to any single homeowner involved in the program. Staff are considering recommending to the advisory board that we increase that amount by possibly $10,000. We can discuss more about the specifics of that and what the results of that are, but this increase would allow us to serve the same amount of residents with more funding going towards each household, or we could just do more households at the current funding level. But either way, we think that an increase here is warranted. The down payment and closing cost assistance program is also increased a bit to $700,000 with the own PGH home ownership program that's been launched here at the URA, again, using American Rescue Plan Act funds. There's been an uptick in the pace of expenditures for down payment and closing costs. So we would like to cushion that program a bit more with the $700,000 that's proposed here. The housing stabilization program does increase quite a bit, I believe around 80% to get us to 850,000 for the 2024 allocation. Last year, for everyone's reference, that program received $550,000, which just one item ago, Derek spoke about moving over to DHS for Action Housing to use. So this program is being run now by Action Housing and with the Housing Resource Center. It's open downtown. They're seeing a lot more clients and a lot more volume. So that proposal is on the table to increase that to 850,000. And then the legal assistance program is penciled in at $1 million here, largely for many of the reasons that we heard through some of the public comment, that there's the ability to expand the program. And this was the recommendation, or especially based on the advisory board's averages and showing it was important that this be funded at a higher level than it currently has been. We found it appropriate to start it at $1 million here for the discussion of this draft. And then the only other two things I'll call out are where the URA deviates from the board's recommendations or averages. The small landlord fund, we've actually reduced to 0 in this draft plan, mainly because of demand right now for the program. We do have, I believe, around $500,000 remaining that could still be committed to projects. So we've thought that in the year 2024's allocation plan, seeing that there's a demand in some of these other programs, that could be skipped for a year. We can obviously discuss that. And then the demonstration program right now is also reduced to 0 in this draft plan, mostly because it's tight to fit all of the other kind of demands into this program that have specific uses already. So, and then I'll also just note for the record that there's $1 million of administration that goes to pay for administrative costs of operating the Housing Opportunity Fund. That's allowable up to 10% of the total fund as per the enabling legislation. And over the last several years, with the URA having a fully staffed housing department and then the other support staff that work on HOF programs, whether it be our attorneys or construction inspectors, people of that nature, they bill their time to HOF. And I believe the URA's costs for operating HOF have been just a hair over $1 million, as it's shown up in some of our annual audits. So I will turn it over to the board for discussion. I thought I maybe saw a hand pop up, but I will keep this open this Excel document, and if there's consensus to try to shift some funds around, we can do that and just make sure that we're balanced on this AMI split up top. So.
Madam Chair, this is Councilwoman Gross, and I was trying to raise a hand, and I have no idea if I have a raised hand or if I don't, or what to do about it. But I don't know if I just wanted to let you know, I don't know who else is waiting to comment.
Well, could you please provide your comments now since you have the floor, and then we will, open it up more broadly.
I would love to, thank you. So I am looking at the spreadsheet, and I'm curious about the $500,000 more for what is essentially, construction financing under the rental gap financing. But I like to always, we always kind of have to clarify that that's the new construction financing, right? And so, council had a debate this year with the URA, who asked us to divert $2.5 million per year, not to add to this budget, which could have been 12.5 million, but instead keep the HOF at 10 million. And promise the URA an extra $2.5 million per year so that they could borrow from Wall Street for a housing bond. So to commit $62.5 million of real estate transfer tax funds, basically, right? The source here, like from our general fund. And that bond will be going out on the street, I think sometime in November. So we'll see whether there's 25 million coming in for new construction or 30 or 40, but it's going to cost us $62.5 million. So if there's going to be $30 million for new construction from a housing bond, I'm curious, what is the rationale for increasing, basically using this 10 million, like an extra 500,000 out of this 10 million? Anyone care to answer?
Well, yes, Councilperson Gross. The rental gap program line item that we see here in this kind of bluish color at the top is actually reduced from, it has typically over the first handful of allocation plans been funded around $4 million. And so it's greatly reduced here to reflect that there are other sources available at the URA, or may be other sources available as we move into 2024. But just given that the bond has not yet been issued and the demand is still there for this program, we felt that it was appropriate to keep some amount of funding for the rental gap program in the Housing Opportunity Fund's purview. And I'd also just call out as well that this can fund preservation and new construction. I mean, the rental gap program and HOF in general is one of the more flexible sources that's available for developers in the city. So there's some benefit there as well to keeping some funding in the program, but we do acknowledge that a reduction was appropriate to help fund other programs. But again, it's we can further that discussion.
Thank you. So thank you for the clarification. I'm like looking at these columns on this little part of my screen, and I don't have up. I'm not, so we're not, there's nowhere, do you have a different slide that contrasts 2023 to 2024, or are we all just looking at the 2024? So I was, thank you for the clarification. So you're saying, did I just hear you say that 2023 was 4 million?
It was 3.8 million, 3,815,000.
Okay, so it's gone down by 25% or so?
Roughly, yes.
Okay, so, all right, thank you. So there's a 25% decrease. And I'll fully admit that, 6 years ago, when we were debating the creation of the Housing Opportunity Fund before it came online, it really seemed like if we were diverting this much of general fund of 10 million a year of general fund revenue, we should really be funding new construction. We really need the units. And I think I probably said that on the record myself. But this is a different moment. And we know that our eviction rate is incredibly high. We've heard, as we just, discussed, that's really a pressing problem now. We're trying to keep city residents in their homes. We know that a majority of the people facing eviction are women and children. And I just have I think we're all and our constituents are at a very different place, especially now that we have put a new set of funds will be coming online for the new construction. And this is hard. I know we need both things. God knows I've lobbied for funding for new construction and for preservation of affordable housing in my own district. And I'm really, really, really glad about the few hundred new units that we've brought online. Like it's awesome. And I've had projects get HOF funding and I'm really grateful for it. But I'm also really distressed by the eviction pressures that we're seeing. And that we have residents on the streets and we have more kids on the streets. And it's incredibly distressing. So I just want us to keep that in the front of our minds for both the legal assistance, which can keep people in their homes, and for the emergency rental assistance, which can keep people in their homes. Do I wish we had another federal pot? I do. But, kind of right now, I feel like we're the front lines with this pot of money. So I'll stop there. Thank you for the clarifications on the new construction money, but I will remind everyone that I think my last update was that the URA is going to market in November. So there will be other funds coming online. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gross. Mark Masterson, I see that you've had your hand up for a while. Would you like to make your comments?
Sure. I had a couple of questions. One on the administrative line. Again, it is, I'll sound like a broken record from the first days of the fund because it's pretty involved in the legislation being drafted. It does say up to 10%. It doesn't say it has to be 10%. I also understand that it costs money to run programs. My question is, if it's at $1 million, is that the way the services are falling? I know it's easy to put half of it in the 50% and 25% in the other two buckets, but why do we have to do that? And it's not a line that we get to change in our allocation plans, which is also, I'm not sure why, but there's nothing in the legislation that says it's got to be 50% of the admin fee goes to 50% allocation towards 30% or lower AMI. So is that just how you guys have interpreted it or how we've always done it? Or is there and is that where the services are being provided? Now there's general admin and payroll and things, but when you're talking about inspectors, is that actually where have you guys done that sort of analysis? Is there some flexibility if there was a greater share of that's actually going towards 80% to 115% AMI? Just it's very formulaic, but we've got data, I think, that might be a better indicator. So I don't know if the Thorny staff has any insight into that.
I can try to at least initially respond here, Mark. And I think this is split up this way or has been over the life of the fund, as you've seen in each allocation plan, to mimic the percentage that we see up here to help balance this entire equation. Frankly, I don't believe that there would be an ability right now to track how much staff time goes towards a project that has 30% of involvement versus 50 or 80. I think the assumption is that it kind of follows the proportion of the money overall for the programs. that being said, I mean, we could put admin in a specific bucket if we chose to. I mean, 80% AMI and below, we technically are serving all people 80% AMI or below, and provide more flexibility if that's an avenue we want to go. I mean, it's really, I mean, city council would have to approve the plan. Like if that's a discussion, you know, we can.
Okay. And then the second question I had was whole homes and some other state programs. It sounds like those are going to be around for a couple of years, and which specific, and with the new bond issue, and I'm sure I'm wrong, so I'm going to ask you to correct me, but my understanding from these conversations is that the rental gap and the for sale development program will be, those projects will be helped by the theoretically by the bond proceeds that the city's going to, that the URA and the city are going to be issuing, whether that's, you know, $25 or $40 million from the funds that city council and the mayor's office have allocated to that purpose. Is that correct? Those are the two programs that would see projects that might be in those two pools for sale development and rental gap financing. There probably would be likely suspects for the new bond issue. Or is it only for rental gap type of projects?
It's that hasn't completely been determined yet. I think the idea here is for housing development. Certainly multifamily, I think we're still working with the bond professionals to vet the feasibility of how you know, single family development could factor into this. But aside from the bond, when it comes to the for sale development program, there was $5 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds for community land trusts that is soon to be under agreement between the city and the URA. And then we have some CDBG and home money that comes to the URA on an annual basis too. So that was more the justification for the reduction in for sale development, not so much counting on the bond.
Okay, so we don't know for sale whether those would qualify. So again, it seemed, again, might be a low number then at 700,000 if the new money coming in can't support it, because we've seen, I think we're seeing more demand. Now, some of that is land trust, but not all of the projects that are happening are land trust related projects. And just concerning, it seems like capacity is starting to get built up again, and I don't want to be, you know, pulling the rug out from under projects that are going to need the help. And we've seen such severe cost increases in construction. And if that one isn't likely to be in the bond program, that's a concern that it's only at 700,000. And then whole homes is that something that assists with the housing stabilization program? But those are
Would that be with the housing assistance program? Wouldn't that be the alignment?
I'm sorry, the housing assistance, not the stabilization. So that with home repairs, that's really what Whole Homes is doing. And I think that's funded, well, nothing's funded for 2 years, but the plan was to fund it for 2 years. And it looks like that will go through again, at least from what I've heard from kind of both sides of the aisle in Harrisburg, that there's not controversy with that. So again, is that something that needs as much? I know I'm the one that is the broken alarm to say we need to put more money into that program. Is just wondering if that's that you guys are considering a couple of years more funding with Whole Homes coming in.
And just a quick caveat, URA staff, thank you so much. We're looking forward to your response. After that particular response, I think we need to move on to someone else who has their hand up, because we have a lot of folks wanting to make comment.
Yeah, I can respond to that, Mark. Yeah, we are hearing positive things about whole home repairs and its, continued existence. But I would say at least, how whole home repairs is being implemented here in Allegheny County. The majority of those funds this year and in, future years most likely will not benefit Pittsburgh city residents. There is a tremendous need in other communities across the county. And I know Action Housing, who runs whole home repairs for Allegheny County, is focused on reaching communities that have never had a home repair program, the whole home repairs dollars. So City of Pittsburgh residents, do not qualify under that definition. So I think, our thinking is that, we need to make sure the homeowner assistance program can remain a vital resource for city residents, because whole home repairs, at least over the next few years, probably won't be something that they can count on.
Thank you so much for that information on
Thank you.
definitely part of the atmosphere that we need to be thinking about. Alan.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. I'll pick up right on that conversation about whole home and everything. As I think many of you know, in a former life, I ran a home repair organization, nonprofit organization. We took advantage of the homeowner assistance program and found working with Derek and Melinda in the URA just a great experience. My concern on such a large allocation of that program, and again, it is super duper important to me and Pittsburgh. My concern is, in addition to the fact that it is at least somewhat duplicative with the whole home repair program and now the new homeowner program in the Hill District. My question there is like, is there even the capacity in the contracting space for this? Right? I know for a fact that the same 7 to 10 contractors are the URA's contractors, are the Hill District's contractors, are the contractors being tapped for a whole home repair, are the contractors I begged to come out to the Mon Valley in my new job and work at the Tricog and help with the Tricog Land Bank. So my concern with that allocation is not about the value of that service, but that it might be too high for the capacity of the sort of subcontracting universe with all of this activity going on. So, that was sort of one comment there that I wanted to add on the homeowner assistance program that was sort of on topic with where this is going. The other real quick thing I wanted to throw a plug for, and Evan, I don't know if this is possible, but while you're adding columns, is there any universe where we could add sort of the remaining allocations from previous years that are sort of uncommitted? You guys put that in the big report that you sent us, and I found that very helpful and enlightening, just to see sort of how much money was uncommitted from previous year's allocations in each of these categories. I found that like a really good data point when I was making my recommendations, when trying to balance the fact that everything on this list is super important. It's not necessarily has to be in competition with each other in only the context of one year, but we could also consider what's remaining from previous years.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Adrian, if I can just briefly respond, those really good points. And just to further, our thinking and sort of the recommendations that we're starting the conversation with today around homeowner assistance program, at least, was that, we do anticipate and are actively considering, increasing the per project funding cap, in the coming year for HAP, so that we can actually complete projects. Because as Mark mentioned a few minutes ago, construction costs have continued to skyrocket exponentially. So, we anticipate, yes, it's a larger allocation, but we would be serving roughly probably the same number of homeowners out of that allocation, but we would be able to bring more funding to bear for each project and actually, repair the roof or replace the HVAC system that homeowner needs. So that's a part of our calculation in the numbers you're seeing there, just so everyone's aware of that.
Thanks, Derek. And you also have continued to remind us that that is one of the programs that actually closes and then opens because of your volume of referrals. Derek.
Yes. So just want to pick up on a few comments that were made. So yeah, I agree that and recognize that rental gap was reduced, but that we do need to keep some funds with HOF from my perspective, because of the flexibility of being able to, utilize the funds for preservation and some other things, as well as if there's a scenario where we need to kind of close a gap on a project that is kind of ready now, and the bond financing is not. But there has been, I think it was said 25% reduction. I think it's closer to 50%, in recognition that other dollars are coming. Also, I do agree that HSP and I think Councilman Gross referenced just kind of we're in a different time, and we do need to think about kind of prioritizing that. But I do think we reflected that in the vote we just had earlier today in the increase to HSP, as well as the staff. Hear me? Hello?
You're back now. You went away for a second, but I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, in the staff draft allocation, as well as the average allocation numbers for the for the LOT program, as well as HSP. So I do think we're recognizing the importance in even our draft. But I like to advocate for the small landlord fund. I know there's a consideration that there's money left over from previous years and hasn't been used as much as it probably could or should. And for me, that's a reflection of how the program is structured. I always said that it should have been structured as a grant or as a forgivable loan. And how it's structured now, I think, is really what's impeding its use. So I would like to have us think about still funding it, but restructuring it to be a grant or a forgivable loan. PHFA had a similar program, and it was wide across the state. It was widely prescribed, kind of overprescribed. But that was because it was structured as a grant. So I think the way it's structured is the issue, not the fact that it's not needed. And more production is actually a part of the solution, for, the issues that, tenants facing eviction and things of that nature, just the market pressures. We can never, cure the issue with just providing rental assistance and just legal assistance. We have to simultaneously be providing more units, and some of that's new construction, some of it's preservation, but also some of it is working with existing landlords to get their units renovated and bring those into the pipeline. And I think this is a program that can help administer that component, but it's just structured wrong, and it's kind of impeding its use. Lastly, and I think the first speaker for public comment, they were really kind of bringing this up. But as the chair of the DEI committee, I really want us to think, not necessarily now through the allocation plan, but through the actual administering of the funds, the actual funding of projects and people, that we layer in a DEI lens to ensure that these funds are, really helping, minorities in our city. We know it's a problem in the Black community. We're hearing it's, a problem with refugees and Latino community, et cetera. So I want us to be intentional with the next step in making sure that these funds are ultimately reach those populations. And I think we can do that through how we think about how some of the programs are drafted, but also be intentional about how the funds are spent. So I'll end there.
Thank you so much, Derek. I see Kelly's had her hand up. Kelly.
So many clicks to unmute. Hi, everybody. I just had a couple of things that came to mind as I was hearing, some of our advisory board members, thoughts on the draft allocation plan. I just wanted to, I know we want to be comprehensive and as to where we are in the landscape, but I also just want to caution us against getting too into the weeds, I suppose, into other funding sources that we know part of what makes us great is flexibility and the ability to respond quickly and to not have folks wait 6, 9, 12 months for responses because we are agile dollars and do have the ability to, again, as adjust as we just did today. So I just want to remind folks of that. And it's not that I don't trust other service providers, but just because there's money allocated for something very broadly, such as home repair or new construction, I just don't want us to think that somebody else is taking care of it. And so we don't have to do that anymore. And then I just wanted to also add to HAP this, while we all are aware, I think that there's a clog in the pipe as it relates to contractors who are available to do the work. We do know that we have old housing stock, and as Adrian just pointed out earlier, this is one of the only programs that we have where we could really open it for a day and spend all the money, it seems, because we have it because the need is so great and because we do have such housing stock, and there's not a lot of funds available to do this, even though it seems that there may be more coming online. Again, I don't want us to count all of our chickens before they're hatched related to other potential and pending revenue streams. And also point out that actually, to both Derek's points, first, Derek Tillman, who had mentioned, kind of how we're able to restructure and think about how we can do things in different ways to get to our goals. And I think that that's something that, again, what makes us kind of unique and in many ways better than some other funding sources, that we're able to kind of think creatively and make those changes quickly, and why I wouldn't want us to pull our money out of different areas because somebody else is doing that may be less forward thinking in that way. But we have seen the beginnings, and I'd hope that we would continue to grow them around a number of initiatives to make, to develop our subcontractors and our contractors so that we are creating more capacity around things in terms of short-term loans, getting people paid faster, because again, that's also an equity perspective around our DEI piece, and making sure that we're getting diverse contractors. Is if you have to wait 90, 120 days, well, that takes a lot of smaller contractors and minority contractors out of the equation. And so we're working on some of those initiatives. And while I think we just got those started in this year, 2023, even though we're looking at 2024, my hope would be that we'd be getting enough traction on those that we would be able to not, of course, meet the full need, but that would be closer to that. And so that we would be able to, spend this money quickly, not just because of the need is there, but because we also have helped to create some capacity in the community. And that's what I was thinking as folks were talking, and that's all I've got.
Thank you, Kelly. I love the summation there, and we do have a variety of challenges. So these are limited funds. We're trying to have a really wide impact with those limited funds. We have a lot of factors that are impacting us in oftentimes negative ways. We have cost increases. We have wages that are very stagnant, especially in a climate of inflation. We are actually seeing wealth, individual and generational wealth, reducing. So we're going to continue to see very serious social problems and have very limited capacity to impact them. But the capacity that we do have, to Kelly's point, is this sense of flexibility and creativity and really trying to pull pieces together. The last point that I would like to make, and I didn't see any other hands up, but we certainly still have time for comment because now I see Alan, is really this concept of accessibility. So when we're looking at each one of these programs, it's really critical to make sure, and to Derek's point, whether it's a small landlord or it's a person in need of rental assistance, that everything we're doing is as low barrier as it can be, is really as widely known as it can be. And if we think about these income categories, I think sometimes our assumption is folks at one end or another end have more capacity to access. And I think that that's maybe not accurate. We really see across the board, regardless of what table, column people fall into, that accessibility is a huge issue of just being able to access programs, but then also to be able to access housing, period. Something that we really haven't talked about outside of rental gap is this accessibility piece, which is really the physical accessibility piece, and making sure we have the kinds of housing stock that actually match the needs of our community, and people can not only, understand that units are available, get on that list, get evaluated, and potentially be able to go into that home, but literally when a home becomes available, they can get in the door or they can get up the sidewalk. So, I think there's a lot of lenses that we keep talking about as a group that we'd like to layer on to our decision-making. And I think once we take, and we've talked about this yearly, once we take our allocation plan for this year, again, with limited resources and competing priorities, to think about how maybe the dollars aren't growing, but maybe the way we execute programs or support programs can actually get better. So we're doing best practice. So we're really being creative and we're being nimble, as Kelly, I think, was really alluding to. It's the nimbleness of this group. It's the expertise of this group that actually can have a pretty massive impact. So Alan, I do see your hand up. I hope I didn't miss anybody.
Yes.
If I did, just yell out.
Yeah, if anybody else needs to jump in, I can step back. Cool. So I don't know if now is not the time for this, Adrian, please say so. But, I wanted to talk a little bit more. I had asked Evan to put the uncommitted funds as a column on this chart, because I think that's super relevant to Congressperson, Councilperson Gross's comment at the very beginning of this section around RGP, around rental gap financing, and, looking to, maybe reallocate some of those dollars to some of our other priorities that are less funded. I mean, we've got almost an entire year's worth of allocation uncommitted in that line item. I think that's relevant info. And if it were, up to me, I would definitely, reduce that further to fund to support other programming that myself and other advisory committee members have mentioned. My preference would be to beef up our sort of frontline supports around the legal assistance program primarily, right? I am happy to see $1 million in that draft for that program, but I think, $1 million cover is basically what they have right now. That covers not every court that has filings that they could be serving with an incredibly effective program. So if I were making this allocation, I would double that, right? But I'm one voice, but I wanted to mention that's the kind of thinking that I think really leans into how creative we can be. We do not have to sort of allocate in an annual vacuum. We can allocate highly in one year when we have a surplus somewhere and then revisit it in the following year. And I think, to Kelly's point, that does really speak to how creative and nimble this fund can be. And I just want to encourage everybody to be thinking not just in an annual context, but in a broader context.
Thank you, Alan. And it's an appropriate time to raise that. There's actually, and I'm going to rely on our URA team here, I believe that we have a different and separate reallocation process because contracts were executed with different organizations in prior years. I think that we do have to go through a different process for allocation versus reallocation.
No, I was just talking about, I'm sorry. I just meant like, do we have to allocate as much in that spot this year, considering the previous allocations?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a
that's all I'm saying.
consideration of spend down.
Yes.
But I think also to your point, there are prior funds that haven't been used. And what do we really want to do about that? You know, and what is the time frame, and what would the process be for us to take a look at unexpensed funds across the years, you know, not only to think about reducing an allocation in one year because dollars are unspent, but also, is there a reuse possibility for some funds, and what would that impact be? So members, we have heard a lot of great voices. I think both informing what we're doing in this moment for the allocation plan, but also the work of the group forward. But we haven't heard all voices. Are we missing comments? Are there concerns or questions or contextual items that members of the group would like to raise at this time?
You've heard my, oh, I'm sorry, there's a hand up.
I see Deidre.
Yes, hi. Are there any funds allocated for people who are behind in property taxes, you know, whose home may be paid off? I thought about that when, you know, that, well, not incident, but the horrible thing that happened, you know, in August. So are there funds allocated for people who need help with, you know, paying their back taxes?
I believe HSP can be used for that purpose. Am I misstating that? The goal being stabilization?
Yeah, you are correct, Adrian.
And that is a huge issue. Thank you for that comment. And I think it's important for us to understand everything that falls into each one of these categories, because sometimes that can also be a bit confusing and overwhelming. Kiana.
I just wanted to respond to the comment about the uncommitted funds, and just want to make sure that the committee is aware that even though funding may not be truly committed to a project yet, it doesn't mean that there's not a great pipeline of projects who are going through an underwriting process, through an application process to be able to receive those funds. Particularly in the rental gap uncommitted line item, that $3.9 million that we see there would only be 3 to 4 projects if we're using the maximum award amount. So I just wanted to add that comment so we keep that in mind as well. Even though it's not committed, that doesn't mean there's not a pipeline of projects looking to use those sources.
Thank you so much for that reminder. And there's a lot that we don't see behind the scenes. You know, the URA is constantly processing and working with families and households and developers. So thank you for that reminder.
Madam Chair, this is Councilman Gross again. I want to pick up on Mr. Tillman's comment about an analysis by DEI or DIE, however we say it. It's been, I think, overdue that either the city and or the URA and the HOF kind of do an equity analysis of the outcomes of our investments. I, on the city side, would love to see a gender intersectional analysis of the impact of like our LRTAs and TIFs. I said it years ago when we created the Gender Equity Committee, and I still maintain that we should be looking at how, you know, what is the equity outcomes of our incentive programs. And so similarly with this pot of money, if there's something that City Council can do, I'm certainly open to the conversation, or if the URA or the HOF kind of has its own allocation. I've seen really good social impact analyses done in other cities. And I'd be happy to provide those examples and then exploring kind of how we fund that so that we can see, again, not just these rows in our allocation plans, but looking retrospectively, kind of who have we impacted? And, are there unintended consequences, or like what actually has been the social impact of what we've done? And I think that could be so informative. So thank you, Mr. Tillman, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gross. And I think that this has been such a rich dialogue, and something that I hope that we can do when we come out with our minutes is to really take a step back and take a look at, items that are directly related to the allocation, items that we want to do that are really overlays for our work for the next year, and how we're doing evaluation. So I think those three pieces are incredible, and something that the group can really devote time each month to making sure that we're bringing these concepts back, because our allocation process always brings out this really great dialogue. And Mark, I do see your hand up.
I just wanted to express support for what Alan had suggested, is to reduce the rental gap with almost $4 million. It's I understand there's a pipeline, but with new money, significant new source of funding coming in, the fact that the $2.5 million that I think last year at this time we thought might be coming to here to have an extra 2.5 to allocate. If that can relieve some of the strain and help us do things, I think that that's an excellent suggestion to reduce that further by $1 million and do things on frontline and legal assistance. And maybe we can, if I heard correctly, I think it was $200,000 support to have that sort of service that keeps people in their homes. That would be something that I would be in favor of.
So at this time, it feels like we're sort of drawing alliances and feelings and supporting certain changes. So we will, need to have someone make a proposal if there are specific reductions that we're thinking and increases in other areas. This would be the time for us to start talking about those concrete changes that are being proposed by a member of the group. So Mark, I did hear, there was a dollar figure attached of 1 million. And putting funds toward 2 different line items. So I think that this would be the time that we would start to, put those changes on the table. I'm going to suggest to the URA, it's going to get a little hectic if we start making changes in the lines, and then, the groups are not coming to consensus on those particular changes. So I'm not sure of the best way for us to be visually tracking those changes. But we do have a more specific proposal, that was just placed on the table by Mark Masterson. And I see Alan, is also has his hand up, and, so I think that this is the time for us to start doing that piece. Does that work for you, URA?
Yeah, so I just copied the sheet we're working on. So now we've got one that's called like draft live edit. So if we need to go back to what we started at, we can just do that. So I think we'll be okay. I mean, maybe Adrian, your call, but you can be the one who says, okay, let's move X amount, so that it's not, as each person maybe states a change getting shifted. It's more like you're articulating what.
Okay. So to be, just logistically, so we have 40 minutes left of the time that is traditionally allotted for the meeting. So we do have one specific change, Mark. I did hear the $1 million mark removal from rental gap, but I was not clear on what you were recommending for the other 2 programs. I know you wanted that to support the LAP.
Actually, I was agreeing with Alan to put that whole $1 million into the LAP.
Okay. So we have a suggestion from members of the group to remove $1 million from rental gap. And we haven't talked about from which income category yet. And I think that that might be something that we want to, hold on until we make some decisions, and add that to the legal assistance program. I'd like to start with dialogue about that.
Yeah,
thoughts from members?
I'll start because and just say that yes, something like that is very much in alignment with what I was hoping to suggest. So I'm down for that as well. Thank you, Mark.
Other thoughts or dialogues about that change?
This is Councilwoman Gross. So you, we didn't say what the distribution was yet? It
No.
would be $1 million. So
Not the
taking
distribution
rental,
between income categories. The suggestion is to move $1 million from rental gap to the LAP program, but we did not walk through each income category, how that would be impacted.
right? So if we did it proportionally, it would look like 750,000 from the 50% AMI and 250,000 from the 25% AMI. Can someone check my math? It doesn't seem quite right.
Well, so I think that this is where it becomes complicated because different programs, we may have a sense that it's more important for different income categories. So I think taking it, it's not an apples to apples, it's an apples to oranges.
I didn't hear another suggestion yet. Is there one on the table?
A suggestion for how we're separating into the income categories.
Isn't that what we're discussing?
We were suggesting moving $1 million from the rental gap program overall into the legal assistance program overall. We had not started to break it down into the income categories yet.
So we need to break it down into the income categories.
That would be our next step. What I was asking is if philosophically members of the group are in support of that type of move. So we were having dialogue about the movement of the funds from one category to another at this time.
Seems like they're related to me because you might be not in favor of it in principle unless you could see what the details were, but
Yeah, just so I'm clear, are we talking about moving an additional $1 million?
Correct.
So that would take, like, for example, if we were going with 2 million from rental gap, that would leave $1 million with rental gap.
No, I think the recommendation was to take, if I'm looking at the sort of spreadsheets in front of us in the total column, the current sort of draft has 2,750,000 for rental gap and 1 million for legal assistance program. My proposal, and I think Mark, is what you're saying too, is to move 1 million from rental gap to LAP, meaning that rental gap would be 1,750,000 and legal assistance would be 2 million.
And just to put that in context, folks are applying for up to $1 million per project. So that would potentially be just 2 rental gap projects.
I would support a move of less than that. I don't know if there's formally a motion on the floor that we need to address beforehand, but I would, I support a shift, but I'm uncomfortable with having 2 projects to fund from a rental gap perspective and making, and we know that I come from legal aid, so I totally support legal, just for the record, I fully support legal assistance. I think that that's a large leap, considering that we still have some funds we're putting considerable funds into demonstration dollars, which we could shift without going back through the whole us, then URA board, then council process. So I don't know if there's formally a motion on the floor, but I would support a move, but just not of that, not of a full $1 million.
I think I'm under the same thought process as Kelly, but I just want to make sure I understand the philosophical move first. So right now we're at just looking at this 2024 draft. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right area because I am on my phone. 2.75 is rental gap, and right now 3,050,000 is LAP. And we're proposing to increase LAP to 4 million. Is that right?
LAP is currently at 1 million, Derek.
Okay. I apologize if I'm.
Yeah. So the proposal would be to double it from 1 million to 2, and I was just saying that I would support an increase that's not quite a double and a decrease that's not quite a little over a third.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I agree with Kelly. Thank you.
So just so that we put this in context again, so the legal assistance team, I'm just going to call them the team that's been presenting to us over time, you really have suggested that what they're looking for is to put lawyer of the day into more courts. At this time, there are courts that have been identified that have really high need, but they don't have the same level of coverage. Their estimation was $200,000 would actually bring one more court online. So that would be a neighborhood such as the West End, Oakland South Side, or the Hilltop. So would we be, in the mindset of, and again, we're just having discussion now, there isn't a motion, but asking for 400,000 or 600,000 into the LAP line item to bring on either 2 more courts in 2 more areas of the city, or 3 more courts in 3 more areas of the city. That just seems like sort of round number math that might be, more digestible.
I would support either of those numbers.
I'm seeing some head shaking.
Well, I would suggest let's try to, it sounded like as if there are a lot of additional evictions that we might be able to prevent if we're in those 3 other courts. So if we moved 600,000 into that, and then maybe we move dollars into demo, the remaining 400,000, it gives flexibility if we guest run and there's, more evictions or, HSP, it really didn't, we needed more into that program or any of these others, it could get shifted back or get shifted around.
It sounds like a motion, Mark Masterson.
I'll make that motion.
If I can, still in discussion. And Mark, are you suggesting moving all of that from rental gap?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, with $1 million out of the rental gap, because there's 3.9 million that's uncommitted. And I understand that there's a large pipeline, but there's also going to be at least 25 and maybe as much as 40 or 50 million that comes online that is going to help with those projects. It's new money that was, actually what we thought we were going to get as an increase to the HOF last year at this time that put in, and that's great. We need money to do that, but I think that's there's still going to be, somewhere around 6 million with that move in rental gap, either uncommitted or, with this current allocation.
Okay, understood. I would counter the request to keep the rental gap at least 2 million, because you tend to at least need nowadays $1 million to $1.2 million per project. So I would say we move to 750, and I still think we need flexibility in case something else needs to be funded. So I would propose moving 400 to LAP and other 350 to demo dollars, but still leave the 2 million in rental gap. So that would be a counter, I guess, to put on the floor for folks to consider.
If we're looking, oh, I'm sorry, Mark, you can go ahead if you want.
So that would be 7. So 600 went into the LAP, and then 150 for that. The rest of the 750 was in demonstration. Is that what you were proposing?
I think I'm saying 400 in LAP and 350 into demo. We could still move money to LAP later if it's deemed to be necessary. But I think we want to have a little bit more flexibility to not be locked in, before we know.
The other place we may be able to squeeze a little flexibility, and I know that this, back to my earlier point, like if we're taking 750 from rental gap, should we take the other 250 from HAP, right? They'd still get a really sizable increase over last year's allocation. and now we'd have $1 million that we could split between LAP and demonstration.
The one thing I just want to add is that, looking at LAP from last year, it was at 350,000. So I don't know, where, and Swain could potentially, I think he might still be on the call. He could potentially provide more context, but, that 200,000 that you were mentioning, Adrian, additional, if you're looking at from 350,000 up to $1 million where we're at now, looking at that effect as well, and what you would be additionally bringing over.
But I think with LAP, and I don't know if Swain is here or not, but like the sense that like it was a pretty scalable thing, a certain dollar figure gets us another court in a sort of transactional way that they already have a model for, and we already know the results. Like that's a little different than sort of scaling something else where we need brand new sort of stakeholders built and capacity built.
Isn't that in addition to okay, so I guess maybe I'm unclear. Is that's growing from their current allocation, which is approximately a third of what we're already have on the table, right?
Right, so it's basically.
Right, so there's
three more
an extra
courts.
2, right? So from the 350, we get
Yeah, I don't,
3 additional courts at $1 million already.
Right.
So it would be a difference. So I think that we already accomplish kind of the goal that we're discussing with this $1 million mark. And I just, I'm not going to vote to decrease HAP from where we have it, because I think it is the one program that really keeps people from getting displaced, and works also hand in hand with a lot of legal assistance pieces around tangled title, et cetera. And it's an anti-gentrification measure. And so just for the record, I'm not in favor of any of those things. Anything that takes from this, I really like the idea that it's growing and that it's growing across our different categories, because it's one of the few things that we have at that 80% AMI that we're able to kind of really have people take advantage of. So I think was it Derek, taking this the 750 to keep a solid 2 million, so it's at least 2 projects, and then moving the 400 if we're going to really add an extra $1 million to the LAP project, then that would be 400 there, and then the 350 in demo, which of course can move wherever we need it to into any of these categories if so necessary.
Yeah, and to
Can I just benchmark for a moment, folks? I think everybody's getting confused at what the allocations are from last year to this year. Our
Yes.
URA team, could we put that back up so that we can revisit that? Because we've already increased LAP significantly.
Thank you.
Basically have the 3 court piece is in there. We know that we can always use more, but I think this might be the great moment for everybody to just take a look again at what went up, what went down, because I just am hearing a little bit of confusion.
So I have it here in this column what the 2023 total allocation for each program was. So you can make an easy comparison to the draft that's here with what the 2023 numbers were.
So Evan, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought LAP for 2023 was at 500,000, not 350.
So there have been year to year. I know with the LAP program, we pulled funds forward from different years, so that might also be part of the confusion.
I believe it bills slowly because you have to, it's always seems like it's a little bit behind.
Yeah, and we pulled forward funds from that first year, and it was a significant amount. So I'm not sure if that's where the confusion is coming from.
I don't want to chime in.
Derek is correct. Let me just go ahead and make sure these are right, but I see Swain's talking now.
No, I was just going to say I am still here because I know people were asking, so I am happy to answer any questions if people, because it is confusing. Just Kelly, to your point, so essentially the way the program's running right now, it's the Lawyer of the Day program, which is kind of a sub program, is in 4 courts right now. In order to maintain that same level of funding going into next year, there would need to be $1 million of funding. So $1 million would maintain the same level of funding we have right now. So imagine like LAP as a ramping up. So not much money was spent in the very beginning, more money was spent as it went on. And in the way that Adrian, you were discussing of, you know, the program itself has been alive for about a bit over 2 years, 2 and a couple months. And then Lawyer of the Day has only been around for one year, and that's where it kind of really picked up. So an allocation of $1 million would not include any expansion, just for clarity's sake. Yeah, because I totally get how it's confusing.
Thank you.
It's just
Yeah.
maintenance of effort.
Exactly, because there was a large allocation in the very beginning, and that supported lower allocations in the 2 following years in 2022 and 2023, and allowed the program still to grow based off that like initial, you know, nest egg.
Thank you. That is incredibly helpful. And hopefully this is helpful.
If I'm doing the math then, and folks with spreadsheets can correct me. So what I'm hearing is for 4 courts, it's $1 million to run the Lawyer for a Day program, which you know
Plus everything
is.
else. So just so everybody knows.
Yeah, plus
but
mediation and general legal assistance that covers the entire city, but nowhere near at the level of a Lawyer of the Day.
So,
yeah.
So, but per court, it sounds like the cost is $250,000. And if we wanted to move into a new court, that would be an additional 200, or I heard at the beginning, I thought you said 200,000, but when I'm dividing, it seems like 250,000.
So
if we wanted to.
Sorry, just to answer that specifically. Yeah, so the legal assistance program isn't just Lawyer of the Day. There's, I know there's lots of lingo and names. There's also mediation, which is critically important to avoiding the entire court system. So it's yeah, and then it's an approximate amount for an expansion to an additional court, because some courts have lower volume, some courts have higher volume, and it's a pretty significant gap. Like the court, Judge King's court down in the South Hills of the city, so Carrick, Overbrook, including some of the Hilltop actually, is like double the average, and then there's some that are much lower. So it depends, but yeah, the average is around 200.
So if we increase the allocation in LAP and it went to 600,000, would the program be able to get into Oakland, Carrick, and West End courts, in addition to covering the 4 existing courts?
Are you asking that?
Yes.
So Judge King's court is particularly high. It depends. I don't want to promise, but yes, the 3 courts, presuming there's essentially every 200,000 we can try to get into another court.
Well, one thing, and I'm making an assumption here, but correct me if I'm wrong. There's higher eviction in certain districts than others. So I would imagine that the need is higher in certain locations where maybe you need a Lawyer of the Day here. Over there, we can work with someone coming kind of sporadically, almost as needed, not almost like a full-time person. So again, that's a general statement. I'm not sure how true that is.
Entirely true. Yeah, there are courts that frankly you don't need a Lawyer of the Day program. So the court over in Lawrenceville would not need it. There was 1 eviction filing last month. The court in Squirrel Hill may or may not need it. There were 9. Even the court in Hazelwood, I do think we want a presence in Hazelwood, but the court in Hazelwood only saw 10 last month. So it depends. But yes, you're totally right. We're already in 3 of the 5 highest volume courts in the city. But yes, that's totally right.
That's pretty much what I thought, but thank you for confirming that. So Hazelwood, others, there may be a future allocation we consider adding it as you see it, the cases and things ramp up. But to that point, coming back to the allocation plan, I personally also think that we've accomplished a significant increase. I mean, 3 times what it was before. Again, as I said before, we need to always be thinking the problem's not going to be solved by one solution. It's all these things working together, you know. So I come back to the small landlord as being a part of the solution. It's the lowest priority right now. I think instead of increasing LAP, we should move 500 to demo dollars. That leaves flexibility, whether it's moved to LAP later or something else. And then the other 250 to the small landlord fund. And again, I don't know if we vote on kind of restructuring the program or if that's an offline discussion, but how the funds are administered, because I think that is just as needed and necessary and a part of the solution to some of these tenants facing eviction. These small landlords can be a part of the solution. So I would propose that we not make an increase right now in the LAP, move funds to demonstration dollars for more flexibility, but also move something to the small landlord fund, 250.
So we have about 15 minutes left in our conversation today. So I am going to, ask that if there are specific allocation changes that we want, that members of the group outline the specific changes in detail with dollar amounts that they are suggesting, so that we can have whatever final discussion that we're able to have in the 15 minutes for today. Does that work for the URA staff?
Yeah, I think it would.
And that works for me. I just made a suggestion. So let's start
You
there.
were a little loose on the dollars. So if you
Okay,
wanna...
so rental gap's 2.75. I'm proposing to move 500,000 from rental gap to demonstration dollars, and 250 from rental gap to small landlord fund. So that will leave rental gap at 2 million, demo at 500,000, and small landlord fund at 250. So those are the only changes that I'm proposing.
Okay. The only thing we have to figure out here, I guess, is the AMI breakdown.
I guess, let's have that discussion, because I don't agree with that change and would not vote for it.
And Evan and the rest of the team, so from a timeline perspective, do we have to have motions today finalized, or do we have a little bit more time for discussion?
So ideally, we would like to have this draft done today because we need to put it out for public comment. So tomorrow, the plan is to put this on our website for public comment until the end of October. So the public has the opportunity to also weigh in on this. So I would encourage to, at least get the draft done today, and then, we can circle back at the next meeting as well to do the final allocation.
Thank you. So we do have a suggestion on the floor. We've heard some dissension from Mark Masterson.
Yeah, Mark, do you want to talk about an alternative? Because I can maybe pick up and suggest an alternative to what Derek just put on the floor.
Go ahead.
So I think, Derek, I recognize the need for demo dollars. My pushback is more strongly on the small landlord fund, not again on the value of it, but on the fact it's got its entire allocation from last year unspent still, uncommitted, and then some. And so I would suggest, like, if we're looking to sort of like rethink some things, I would love to join a conversation about rethinking how to be more effective with those dollars that have already been committed. And, I would say, let's put as much of that 750 from rental gap as possible into legal assistance program, and then negotiate on the demo dollars, and then get some sort of commitment to rethink the existing $500,000 in the small landlord fund. That's a proposal just to try to find some consensus.
I would be okay with that, as long as we focus on, I guess it won't be today, but looking at restructuring the small landlord fund. So I will be okay with that, but I would still advocate that majority, if there's going to be a move, is move the demo again, those funds can still be moved to small land. I meant to LAP later. So hear me on that. It's not against LAP. It's just allowing flexibility.
And we had talked about 2 meetings ago, actually convening a focus group or a key informant interview process with the small landlords. So I do think that that's something that the group is committed to really trying to flesh out how it can be used the most effectively and have the most impact.
I just want to make a point. I think with running programs like Lawyer for a Day and the other things that are happening, it's not, I mean, you've got to be able to plan on the funds being there so that you can have the attorneys and the mediation and all of that stuff happening. It gets difficult. It's not like flipping a light switch where you turn it on and you've got folks that are to do that. So that's why I would want to see the funds hitting, if we're taking 750 out of program to put it into the LAP program. And I know we're short, but I'm willing to make a motion to that effect if that helps with the time. I know that we're trying to build consensus, but I also know we've got 5 minutes or
We have about 10
7
minutes, but
minutes
yes,
left.
Mark, please formally outline.
I will make a motion to move 750,000 from rental gap to the LAP program.
Second.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Are we having a
I thought
vote?
there were different levels of that.
Right.
I thought we were moving part of it, or I guess that's not your motion. So we just vote no and then do another one, I guess would be procedurally, Madam Chair, how that would work. Okay.
The person who made the motion can also motion to rescind their motion. That would need a second.
Or a friendly, or a friendly amendment to, Mark, would you be open to a friendly amendment to?
Or Mark, do you have a distribution that you want to suggest between the two AMI columns?
Well,
You muted yourself.
We weren't really talking about that, but I believe the bulk of the clients are in that 30%, like probably 75% are in 30% or less AMI. So I think that I'd be willing to leave that to URA staff to figure out how that balances out to be compliant. Because anything under 30%, I think we're going to be fine. I guess, Swain, am I incorrect in understand, at least from what I understand from some of the information that you guys have provided, that's 60 or 70% of the clients that you're helping in that income category and 30% or less AMI?
Yeah. The grand majority are below 30%. That's right. I mean, the reality is if you have more income, you often aren't in the eviction process.
So could you restate the numbers for me, Mark?
Just was moving 750 from, my motion was to move 750 from rental gap to the LAP program.
But that needs to be clarified.
I
feel like I'm still stuck in a loop here, that there's 2 columns for the rental gap financing.
So Councilwoman, I think what we were going to do is vote first on if we agree fundamentally with moving 750 from the RGP to LAP, and then
that wasn't the motion, actually. Okay, fine.
That was the motion, was to move it from the RGP to legal assistance program, the 250,000, because I think that there's some contention around whether to move
or is Mark willing to make an amendment to that to some degree,
right.
And then we can vote on that. So I guess if you can answer that first.
Guess it would depend on what the amendment is, but
at this point, I think that we really just Mark put a motion on the floor. Is there a second for Mark's motion to?
I already seconded.
Right, and so we would vote on this and then how to move it across the categories, because it may be a moot point across categories if the motion doesn't pass.
So all those in favor of the motion put forward from Mark Masterson to take $750,000 from Rental Gap and move it to the LAP program, please signify by saying aye.
Madam Chair, may I call for a roll call vote, please?
You certainly can. So can the URA put the roll back up? I can't see everybody that's in the meeting.
Here, I could maybe just paste it into this Excel sheet.
Or can you call the roll, Evan?
Sure. Of people who are here, or sorry, Councilperson Gross, should I do the entire roll or just people who are present? What's the procedure here?
The people who are present.
Okay. Tammy Thompson. Is Tammy still here? I think Tammy's dropped, but Karen Garrett.
I'm sorry, are we in quorum still then?
I'm here. Karen Garrett's still here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, but we're looking for a vote here, and I think the question now is if we have 7 members still, so.
I was still seeing Tammy.
I don't see her.
We picked up Deb though, so but we dropped Tammy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe, yeah, we are still in quorum.
So Karen Garrett is being asked for her roll call vote at this time. Aye or nay to move the $750,000 from Rental Gap program to LAP.
Nay.
Okay.
Was that reported?
Yes.
Thank you.
Deb Gross,
Aye.
Mark Masterson,
Yes.
Deidre Washington,
Yes.
Paul Spradley. Paul still here? Okay. Alan Cisco,
Yes, aye.
Derek Tillman,
No, not in this form.
Adrian Walnaha,
Nay.
Kelly Ware.
Nay.
That's, I have that as 4-4. I don't, there's no one else here. Are there any other advisory board members here that I didn't call out?
So I would ask Mark, would you be willing to make an amendment? I think we can get this done if it's a more balanced approach, and then because it doesn't seem to be a tiebreaker. So
Well,
would you be willing-
I don't think the motion passed, which is what this was for. So there's got to be another motion, right?
Okay.
So I would move that we to reallocate $750,000 from the Rental Gap program, 400 of which to the legal assistance program, and 350 of which to the demonstration dollars program.
I'm sorry to do this before you would think about seconding. I don't understand how we're moving it out without knowing how it distributes, because the entire allocation plan is what we're trying to amend. And that row has a 50, I'm really squinting with my old people eyes, a 30% AMI column, a 50% AMI column, and an 80% AMI column. So I know this is the 3rd or 4th time I've said this, but I don't understand how it's an amendment unless it amends all of the numbers in that row.
We have not finalized the allocation plan. We are not voting on the allocation plan in total today.
But I'm looking at the screen.
Is a draft allocation plan that can be put out for public comment. And then we will be coming back next month to do final conversation and actual vote on the full allocation plan.
Okay, so but what you're putting out for public comment, and I apologize, are you only putting column total which I cannot read those column headers. What is the column header? It's
So
just too small. on
Councilwoman, we're
screen.
just bifurcating the vote because we could spend another 10 minutes on how to move it. But
But
if
what are you going to put out for public comment? If we're
No, so-
amending what you're putting out for public comment, what are you putting out?
So we will put the full amount out and it will be across the categories, but we're just voting on it in two parts because we could have spent 10 minutes on how to move it properly. And that last motion was defeated and we would have been out of time. So we're just voting on whether or not to move the 750 and then we would vote on where that.
So the total column will read 2 million
So the
for
total
rental gap.
column and then the percentage column. So just one and then the other.
You're going to do a second motion that changes
the first-
column.
Right, so right now we're just moving the total column and then we would decide how to move it across the AMIs if we agree to move the total column. Because if we don't agree to move the total column like we didn't for the last motion, we would have spent a lot of time on how to do something that we agreed not to do at the ultimately. I don't know if that makes sense.
And we, at this time,
Well,
have
if no one else is confused, I
remaining
guess it's
motions,
just
So
me.
I'm going to call for a vote on Kelly's motion. Do we have a second on Kelly's motion?
Kelly, would you mind restating?
Oh,
it so I
sorry,
can put
restating
the
my
num-
motion, yes.
Yeah, so I can
So
put the numbers.
my motion is to move $750,000 from the RGP program, placing 400,000 in the legal assistance program and the remaining 350 of that into demo dollars.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that one.
Okay, great. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those abstaining from
Aye.
the vote, please signify by saying aye. All those who are voting against Kelly's recommendation, please say aye. So that recommendation is moving forward. Thank you, Kelly. We have 1 minute left in today's meeting. The issue related to how these are going to break down by AMI has been noted that there are different categories per the different programs, and those will need to line up with totals for the other columns that have already been determined. So how many members do we have that can continue the conversation?
I can stay for a bit.
I'm really sorry, guys, but I have a hard thing at 4 I really have to be at.
I have to also be at something.
So I will ask the URA staff, are we able to put out the total without the AMI percentages attached for the public comment? Because we won't have a quorum to do anything at this point.
Doesn't it distribute? I mean, because there's like legislation that kind of determines 50% has to go to 30% AMI, et cetera.
Correct. That's what we would need to sit here and discuss how the percentages change because it's different categories have different AMI levels.
Could we just vote to allocate it the 50, 25, 25 that it would be by legislation?
Right.
Because I don't think we have a lot of flexibility on that.
But I think then the totals get skewed in the final totals.
Well, I mean, if we take.
So if I can interject really quick. So, we're gonna have to take from the 30% and the 50% AMI levels. My recommendation would just be to take, 50,000 or not 50, 500,000 from the 30% and 250,000 from the 50%, and then just allocate those accordingly across those two programs.
I would make a motion to do that.
I would second that.
Second, yeah.
Any abstentions on that vote? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We are at 4:01. We do have a draft allocation plan to be put out for public comment. I'm not sure how many members are still with us at this point.
Thank you.
And I will let you all know, I'll send a link to the board with what we post online for the public comment. Feel free to share that with, anybody that you want to spread that to, but it will be posted on our website. So thank you all.
Jed, one last thing. Can you follow up maybe by email on what the process would be to look at the structure of the small landlord fund as well?
Yeah, I'll speak with Derek and Evan, and we'll circle back with you for sure.
Yeah, we definitely will.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Do we have a
Absolutely.
motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.